If you've ever watched a number disappear from a screen and felt like a piece of your own chest went with it, this story is for you. That hollow feeling, the one where your hands go cold and your mind starts replaying every decision that led to this moment, has nothing to do with arithmetic. It is not really about the money at all. And by the end of this, you will understand why. Today I want to tell you about a merchant who lost everything in a single season, and the monk who was asked one simple question by that broken man. The monk's answer took only 7 words. 7 words that undid a lifetime of fear in less time than it takes to breathe. But we are not there yet. First, you need to understand the man who asked the question, because his story is closer to yours than you might want to admit. Before we go further, tell me something in the comments. When you think about the money you have lost, or the money you are afraid of losing, what is the actual fear underneath it? Not the number. The feeling. Write it down. You might find that 100 strangers reading this carry the exact same one. There was a merchant named Tarek who lived in a trading town built where 2 rivers met. He had started with nothing but a cart and a stubborn kind of hope, and by the time he was 40, he owned 3 warehouses, a fleet of boats, and a house with a courtyard so large that his own voice echoed when he called for his servants. People in the town did not say his name without also saying the word rich, as if the two had grown together like a vine around a post. Tarek liked this. He had built an entire self out of the sound of that word. He measured his mornings by the ledgers his clerks brought him. He measured his sleep by how the markets had moved the day before. When the harvest was good and the boats came in heavy, he slept like a stone. When a storm delayed a shipment, he would lie awake until dawn, doing sums in the dark, as though counting hard enough could hold back the tide. His wife had stopped asking him to come to bed at a reasonable hour years ago. His son had learned to recognize the particular silence that meant his father was calculating losses, and to stay out of the room until it passed. Tarek was not a cruel man. He gave alms at the temple gate every new moon, more than most merchants of his standing. But there was a difference between generosity and identity, and Tarek had let money become the second one. Ask him who he was, and before he could stop himself, he would answer with what he owned. This is the wound so many of us carry without naming it. We think we are protecting our future. What we are really doing is building our sense of self out of something that was never built to hold that kind of weight. Then came the year the river changed its mind. A flood took 2 of his warehouses in a single night, the water rising faster than anyone could carry the goods to higher ground. Within the same season, a partner he had trusted with a large shipment vanished, taking a debt that could not be recovered. Then a fire, unrelated to anything, as fires often are, found the 3rd warehouse and finished what the flood and the theft had started. In the space of 4 months, the man who had been the wealthiest merchant on either riverbank stood in an empty courtyard that no longer echoed with servants' names because there were no more servants to call. Tarek did not cry, not at first. He did something stranger. He went completely silent. His wife said later that it was the silence of a man who had lost a language, not just a fortune, because the only words he had ever used to describe himself were suddenly gone. For 2 days, he simply sat in the ruined courtyard among the ash and the water stains, unable to eat, unable to speak, staring at the place where his warehouses used to stand as if staring hard enough might rebuild them. Neighbors came with bread and quiet condolences, the way people do when they are secretly relieved the disaster belonged to someone else. Tarek barely noticed them. He kept running the same sum in his head over and over, not because the arithmetic would change, but because the counting itself had become the only voice he knew how to use. But what he did not know, standing in that empty courtyard, was that this collapse was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of the only part of his story that would ever matter. He wandered for 3 days without direction, sleeping in the doorway of a shuttered shop one night and beneath a bridge the next. Not because he had nowhere else to go exactly, but because he could not bear to be recognized. On the 3rd day, half-starved and hollow-eyed, he found himself climbing the stone path toward the small monastery on the hill above the town, a place he had walked past 100 times and never once entered. He did not go there for wisdom. He went there because it was the only door left that he had not already tried, and because some part of him, some part older than his pride, hoped that someone inside might simply feed him. The monk who met him at the gate was old enough that his back had curved like a question mark, and young enough in the eyes that Tarek felt absurdly embarrassed to be seen by him. This monk had a name once, before the monastery, but by now everyone simply called him the Keeper of the Bowl, because his only possession, the only thing he had touched with his own hands in 20 years, was a single wooden bowl he used for rice. Remember that bowl. It matters later. The monk did not ask Tarek his name, or what had happened to him, or why a man in such fine but filthy clothes was standing barefoot at a monastery gate. He simply handed him a cup of water and said, "Sit," as if Tarek were expected. Tarek sat, and once he sat, something in him broke open the way a dam breaks, not gently, but all at once, and he told this stranger everything. The warehouses, the flood, the partner who vanished, the fire, the silence in the courtyard, the 3 days of walking with nowhere to walk to. The monk listened without interrupting, which Tarek found almost unbearable, because he had grown used to people either flattering him or fearing him, and this old man did neither. When Tarek finally finished, his voice cracked and small, he asked the only question left in him. "What do I do now that I have lost everything?" And this is where everything changed, though not in the way Tarek expected. The monk did not offer comfort. He did not tell Tarek that things would get better, or that the gods were testing him, or that hard work would rebuild what he had lost. Instead, he reached for his wooden bowl, the only thing he owned, held it up between them in the afternoon light, and asked Tarek a question of his own. "Do you see this bowl?" Tarek nodded, confused. 20 years ago, the monk said, a wealthy family gave me this bowl as a gift along with a robe, a mat, and a small purse of coins. Within a week, thieves came through the monastery grounds at night. They took the purse, they took the robe, they took the mat from beneath me while I slept. In the morning, I found only the bowl left behind, rolling in the dirt where they had dropped it, perhaps because it was too plain to be worth the trouble. Tarek waited for the lesson about gratitude, about being thankful for what remains. It did not come. Instead, the monk turned the bowl slowly in his weathered hands and said, "I did not grieve the robe. I did not grieve the mat. I did not even grieve the coins, though they would have fed me for a season. Do you know why?" Tarek shook his head. "Because none of it was ever mine to lose," the monk said. "It passed through my hands the way the river passes through the valley. The valley does not own the river. It only shapes where the water goes for a while." Tarek felt something tighten in his throat, the beginning of an old, unspoken fear finally being spoken aloud by someone else. Then slowly, the monk set the bowl down between them, looked directly into Tarek's eyes, and gave him the 7 words that would undo everything Tarek believed about himself. "You never owned it. You watched it." The silence after those words was different from the silence in Tarek's empty courtyard. That silence had felt like a door slamming shut. This silence felt like a door swinging open onto air. "You never owned it," the monk said again, more gently this time. "Not the warehouses, not the boats, not the sound of your own name followed by the word rich. You watched it arrive, the way you watch weather arrive, and you watched it leave the same way. The watching was real. The ownership was a story you told yourself so the watching would feel less frightening." Tarek sat with that for a long time, the cup of water growing warm in his hands. He had spent 20 years building his identity out of a river he had mistaken for a possession. He had measured his worth by how much water was currently passing through his hands, and every flood, every theft, every fire had felt like a piece of himself being torn away, when in truth, nothing that was truly his had ever been threatened at all. This is the part of the story that belongs to you now, not to Tarek, because that merchant is you, every time you refresh your banking app hoping the number will finally make you feel safe enough to stop checking. He is you when a bill arrives, and your whole body tightens as though your worth as a person is written somewhere in that envelope. He is you when you compare what you have to what someone else has, and feel the quiet, corrosive shame of coming up short. The fear was never really about the money. It was about mistaking something that flows for something that stays, and then panicking every time it did what flowing things do, which is move. The philosophical heart of this teaching is attachment, the belief that we can hold something so tightly that it becomes permanently, unshakably ours. Money was never built for that kind of grip. Neither was health or youth or other people's love, though we try to grip all of them the same white-knuckled way. The suffering does not come from having less. It comes from the gap between what we are watching pass through our hands and what we insist on calling ours forever. Close that gap, even a little, and the fear loses most of its teeth. Notice that the teaching is not indifference. The monk still cared for his bowl. He still washed it, still filled it, still needed it to eat. Non-attachment was never about pretending money does not matter, or performing a kind of hollow calm while your rent goes unpaid. It is about the quiet, internal difference between using something fully while it passes through your hands and mistaking that something for the measure of your own worth. A person can care for money with great attention and still not build a self out of it. That is the entire difference between Tarek before the flood and Tarek after it. His hands did the same work either way. Only the grip had changed. This does not mean you stop working. It does not mean you stop saving or planning or caring what happens to your family. The monk still used his bowl every single day. He simply understood that the bowl was not the point. His life was not smaller because he owned less. It was steadier because he had stopped confusing what passed through his hands with who he actually was. So here is what I want you to do, starting tonight, with no cost and no risk involved. First, tonight before you sleep, write down 3 things money cannot buy that you already own. Not things you hope to have, things you have right now, in this exact life tonight. A voice that can still say, I love you to someone. A pair of hands that still work. A memory that still makes you laugh when you are alone. These are not consolation prizes. They are the actual floor beneath your feet, the one that was never for sale and can never be repossessed. Second, the next time you check an account balance, a bill, or an investment, pause for 3 full breaths before you react. In that pause, ask yourself one honest question. Am I afraid of the number, or am I afraid of what I have decided the number says about me? Almost every time, it is the second one. Naming that difference out loud, even just to yourself, takes away half its power. Third, once this week, give something away that costs you a little. Not because generosity fixes finances, it does not, but because the simple act of releasing something with your own hand retrains a mind that has been gripping. It reminds your nervous system, not just your intellect, that your hands can open and you will still be standing afterward. Tarek did this himself. Weeks later, the first time he had 2 coins instead of none, and he gave one away before he had even decided where he would sleep that night. He said it was the first time in years he felt richer, not poorer, for letting something go. Picture, for a moment, the old monk at dusk, sitting outside his small stone room with his wooden bowl beside him, the light going gold and soft over the hills, owning almost nothing and missing nothing either. That image is not a fantasy of poverty. It is a picture of a man who finally stopped confusing the river for the valley. Tarek did rebuild, in time, slowly, with smaller boats and a smaller house, though this part of the story rarely gets told, because it was never really the point. What mattered is that he rebuilt without the old grip in his chest. He kept the habit of the pause. He kept the habit of writing down what could not be taken. And when people asked him, years later, what the flood and the fire had taught him, he did not talk about resilience or hard work. He simply repeated 7 words that were not his own, the same 7 words a curved-backed monk had once given him for free, the only inheritance that never once left his hands. You never owned it. You watched it. Say that to yourself the next time fear tightens around your ribs at the sight of a number. You are not the river. You are not even the valley. You are the one watching, breath after breath, and the watching itself was never at risk. If this story gave you even a single moment of quiet tonight, there are more waiting for you here. Next time, I want to tell you about a king who traded his crown for a single night of sleep and what he asked for in return when he woke. Until then, walk gently, hold loosely,